When The Rock says he wants his own movie, he gets his own movie. I'm Joe Starr, and we're talking his upcoming Black Adam movie right now on ScreenJunkies News. As we reported earlier this week, The Rock has been meeting with Warner Brothers regarding his role in the DCEU, and today it looks like we know a little more about how it will fit into their ever-expanding cinematic universe. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the forthcoming Shazam film being developed by DC and New Line will be developed concurrently alongside a solo Black Adam film, which will feature the one and only Rock as the bad guy. Here to share his wisdom of Solomon and to explain that joke to me is our own Adam Hlavik. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how you doing?
So Shazam and Black Adam, admittedly, a little beyond my DC knowledge, but that's why we have you and your wonderful haircut.
Thank you.
Here to help. Originally, we all sort of thought this was going to be a Shazam movie that heavily featured The Rock, and now we have two things. What do you feel about this split?
I from a business standpoint, I completely understand why they would do this. It would make complete sense because The Rock is the most powerful entertainer in the world right now. Yeah. He is at the top of his game. He has the power to make these decisions that he can tell Warner Brothers and New Line and DC and tell them, look, I want to do my own movie. Give me a movie where we can explain and go a little bit more into Black Adam's history, kind of like what his role is in the DC universe, how in one version he's a villain, but then he kind of becomes an anti-hero, and maybe create a movie where, he's in somewhat of a situation where maybe someone's trying to enslave his people. And even though he's an anti-hero, a villainous type of a character, there's still some goodness in him. But then trying to tie that back in the DCEU, I think that's going to be really interesting to see how they then use the Shazam movie to bring that character back or to reintroduce him, or how they're going to do it to then let that character be involved in the greater DCEU.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Especially on the Warner lot, San Andreas was one of their most successful movies at the box office. So, I mean, this is a guy who in that studio has sort of the clout to make a call like this. It's interesting to me that they're going to introduce Black Adam before Shazam, as opposed to you introduce a villain in a Batman movie and then you spin them off. With sort of leading this part of the franchise with a villain movie, we know DC likes a darker, grittier tone for their heroes, but I think we can assume that at this point they've also, or not for their heroes, for their films in general, but I feel like we can assume at this point they've heard the feedback that people don't necessarily want that to be an aspect of their good guys. And I feel like we see that across the line in tone shifts for the movies, with Rebirth in the comics. Is this sort of a way to serve dark and gritty while sort of preserving Shazam?
Yeah, I mean, I think DC fans really like what the Dark Knight trilogy gave us, which was a darker, grittier, more realistic tone. I think it works for certain characters, Batman being one of them. I don't think that's well suited for all of them. And I think, Jeff Johns, even The Rock himself have addressed the fact that, they, going forward, their goal is to really make their movies hopeful and optimistic. But I think there is some wiggle room with certain characters. I think Black Adam could potentially be one of them, because he is kind of in that gray area where, he can be a villain, but he doesn't necessarily have to be the worst of the worst.
Right. In the comics, he sort of has a love-hate, sort of honor-bound relationship with the JSA.
Right.
And it looks like they're trying to retool him to be even more of an anti-hero.
Sure. Now. And I think it's a good opportunity for The Rock, because The Rock has played so many heroic characters. We've only really seen him be a villain in The Scorpion King, or in The Mummy Returns, where he was really this horribly CG animated thing that wasn't even The Rock. So I really like the fact that he's playing the villain and not playing Shazam. So I'm curious to see kind of where this can go. And speaking of Brad Payton, or speaking of San Andreas, there's been some rumors and speculation that potentially this guy could be directing the movie, because he's doing Rampage. He did San Andreas. There's been some followings happening on the tweets between Jeff Johns and Hiram Garcia and Brad Payton. And surprisingly, when it happened last time with Joe Manganiello, and I think even Jason Momoa, it ended up being that they ended up being in the DCEU. So whether this will happen or not, I wouldn't mind it. I thought San Andreas was very entertaining.
I mean, you've got to give some credence to, it sounds ridiculous.
It does.
But, it happened with Momoa. And in high school once, I remember I got 4 different notes suggesting that a particular girl liked me, and I listened to the rumors, and we ended up dating for about a week and a half. It was a good week and a half.
It's a good week and a half,
so,
though, right?
No, you know, so there's some
like, I think there's some validity to it, maybe.
Absolutely. And, you know, you brought up the Scorpion King. This is not The Rock's first pass at Egyptian anti-heroes.
Yeah. Super interesting. Again, going back just what we were talking about earlier about him playing this kind of a character, it's different. It's different for The Rock, and he has the command that he can make these sort of decisions. And I wonder what really maybe influenced this. If it was him looking at the DCEU as a whole and saying, well, I want to be a part of this, but I want to do things a little differently. I want to do things a little bit my way, because the movie is it's at Warner Brothers, but it's through their subsidiary New Line Cinema.
Right.
So it's not directly at Warner Brothers. So I think they have more wiggle room to kind of play with.
Yeah.
In terms of how they want to build their universe and also incorporate it.
And this is almost the exact opposite of, you know, The Mummy, where he was introduced as the villain in a Mummy film and then given a spin-off as the sort of
hero.
anti-hero side. So you've already gotten shades of gray through The Rock from the Scorpion King. Any closing thoughts on Black Adam? What you'd like to see The Rock bring to the DCU?
I mean, The Rock is a powerhouse. He's such a talented guy. He's a very smart businessman. And I think that's part of the reason why this is happening is because I think, again, he's looking at the overall kind of goals and plans of the DCEU. And he wants to get in a little bit on the action, but I think he also probably looked at what's come before it and wants to help kind of shift the tone and the balance of that universe into a better place.
I mean, it's ironic that The Rock wants to take DCEU out of the rock bottom because wrestling terms. Adam, thanks for hanging out and talking Black Adam with me, man. Guys, we want to know what you think. Do you smell what The Rock is cooking when it comes to Black Adam? And would you cook the same things? Let us know in the comments. Click some internet here on the right. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Screen Junkies News.